Hi everyone, today we're going to be solving multi-step inequalities. Okay, so solving multi-step inequalities is just like solving multi-step equations. We're going to isolate the variable using the inverse operation. Now, since there's going to be more than one step in these, it's usually easiest to add or subtract first if there is addition or subtraction, and then multiply or divide. Remembering that when we're working with inequalities, if you multiply or divide by a negative, you need to flip the inequality sign. So once again, it's usually best to add or subtract first, then multiply or divide. Okay, so let's try this one together. Here we have y divided by -6 plus 7 is less than 9. So I see addition, and I know that the inverse operation is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, and I have y divided by -6 is less than 2. Now I see that I have division, so I know that the inverse operation there is multiplication. So notice I am multiplying both sides by -6. Since I'm multiplying by a negative, I need to flip my inequality sign. And now I can finish solving. I'm left with 1y is greater than -12. So please don't forget, when we multiply or divide by a negative, your inequality sign needs to flip. Now to graph that, you can do it really quick. Here's -12. So since there is no or equal to, we're going to use an open circle here. And it does say y is greater than -12. So we want all of the values that are larger. So those are all the values to the right. And now you're done. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and give these 3 a try. We'll check your answer in just a few seconds. Okay, so here for number 1, add 1 to both sides, divide both sides by 4, and you're left with b is less than 2. So open circle to the left. So nothing tricky about this one. Now for number 2, remember we're trying to isolate our variable. So the first thing I'm going to move is the 8. I know you don't see it, but we know that this is a positive 8, so the opposite of that is -8. So please check this number. -28 minus 8 is -36. I usually see a lot of mistakes with this number. And then divide both sides by 9. C is greater than or equal to -4, so we use a closed circle and to the right. Now notice here we divided, but it was by a positive number, so we don't need to flip our inequality sign. But if you look at number 3, so first subtract 11 from both sides, then we're multiplying both sides by -2. So since we're multiplying by a negative, our inequality sign needs to flip. So we're left with n is less than -2. So open circle and to the left. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a few special inequalities. So sometimes you're in the process of solving an inequality and your variable is just going to disappear from both sides. So if your variable ever disappears from your inequality, you're going to have one of two things happening. The first option is if you're left with a statement that is false or not true, that means that we have no solution. So sometimes your variable will disappear and you're left with something that just is not true. It doesn't make sense. So that means it's no solution. However, if your variable disappears and you're left with something that is true, that means that we actually have infinite solutions, which means every single number in the entire world works for that inequality. So either you're going to have no numbers that work or all numbers that work. So let's try this one together. Here I see 8x minus 3 is greater than 4 times 2x plus 3. So I see parentheses here, which means I'm going to distribute the 4 to both the 2x and the 3. So remember, we need to multiply it to both terms. 4 times 2 times x is 8x. 4 times 3 is 12. Now, whenever we have a variable on both sides, I usually say pick the smaller one and move it. But what you'll notice here is that they're the same size. So you can pick either one, and let's do the opposite. The opposite of positive 8x is negative 8x on both sides of your inequality. Now, if I have 8 x's and I take away all 8, that leaves me with 0 x's. And then on the right, same thing. I'm left with 0 x's here. So what I have left is -3 is greater than 12. So you can see this is what it looks like when your variables disappear. So now we have to look at this statement. This statement says -3 is greater than 12. Well, we know that this is just not a true statement. It is false, which means we have no solution. So once again, if your variable disappears and you're left with a false or untrue statement, it means there are no solutions to this inequality. Now let's try another one together. Here we have 2 times 5x minus 1 is less than or equal to 7 plus 10x. So same thing, I see some parentheses, so let's distribute. 2 times 5 times x is 10x. Be careful with this one. 2 times -1 is -2. And then we have is less than or equal to 7 plus 10x. So same thing, we have a variable on both sides. Let's pick one and do the opposite to move it. So the opposite of positive 10x is negative 10x. But on both sides, I have 10x minus 10x, which is 0. So I'm not going to write any x's. And what I have left is this statement, which reads -2 is less than or equal to 7. So now I have to decide, is this true or false? And yes, this is a true statement. -2 is smaller than 7. So that means we have infinite solutions. That means every single number on our number line works. So if you were to graph this, the graph looks pretty interesting. So let's say we have like -1, 0, and 1. Since it's infinite solution and every single number on my number line works, I just literally do a line with arrows going all the way to the left and all the way to the right. So this shows that it is infinite solutions. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and give these last 2 a try. All right, so here, for the first one, we distribute and we see that we have variable on both sides, so we try to move it and our variable disappears. What we have left is -10 is less than 5. Now this is a true statement, which means we have infinite solutions. Now for number 5, can you do me a favor? Please check this number right here. Make sure you have a positive 4 here. When you distribute, a negative times a negative becomes a positive. So we add 12n to both sides and our variable disappears. And what we have left is 4 is greater than 5.2. So 4 is not greater than 5.2. So this is a false statement, which means that we have no solution. Okay, that is all for today's lesson. Thank you so much for watching.